when they're playing the whole game and they're using and applying those skills, and they're coming across problems, they're having to make decisions, they're having to reason, that is the whole game approach. At its best in the classroom, what that looks like is when, in terms of they're visiting the whole game in terms of mathematical understanding, in terms of a scientific experiment. One of the examples that we're not going to talk about today, but one of our whole game approaches at Jess is the Viking Living Museum, where the children actually have a living Viking museum at the end of the topic, where they're using and applying all those skills and teaching their parents all about the Vikings. So they're playing the whole game, they're being the Vikings, they're in role. Key elements of real life learning. When we thrashed out what real life learning was at Jess, we came up with some non-negotiables of what the elements are at Jess in our project planning. Application of maths and English skills across the curriculum, not just teaching the maths and the English discretely. We've always had a creative approach to the curriculum. We have a creative curriculum that has been ongoing for some 5 years, but over the last 2 years, we've made those cross-curricular links tighter and become more flexible in terms of when we teach maths, how long for, where we teach maths. And I'll touch on that again in a little while. Inquiry-based learning, that is true child-initiated, child-led, active learning. And inquiry-based learning, I'm sure you're all familiar with it, you deliver it, is when the teacher is the facilitator supporting the learning and the children are motivated enough to lead their own learning. It might start with some exploration, some questions, and it leads into an investigation where the children are investigating a problem, a scenario, an issue, an idea. They're gathering their own information, they're refining the information, they're analysing it, they're presenting the results, they're drawing conclusions, and they're coming up with solutions, ideas to go forward. One of the things about inquiry-based learning, for an example, first of all, that we're not again touching on today, but that's quite current at Jess, is that we use real-life learning outside the classroom as well, to extend the more able. And one of our more able groups is currently involved in a real-life learning project with a big element of inquiry. And the scenario put to them, or the question put to them, was, what if Dubai wins Expo 2020? What if they win the bid? So the thing with inquiry-based learning is it takes the children right back to what they already know, their prior learning, and it builds on it. So in that group that I do lead on, the children didn't know what an expo was. 1 or 2 of them was familiar with Expo 2020. We had some peer teaching, and their very first job was to go back to what they know already and build on that, and they develop their own questions. What is an expo? Where do expos take place? When was the last expo? How do countries bid for the expo? And by the time they've found their own information and knowledge, so I'm not going to give it to them, they're going to find it themselves at their fingertips in terms of ICT, books, talking to the parents, through homework activities. Their end product is they're going to present the solution or the idea of Dubai, if it wins Expo 2020, what are the implications of that? And again, inquiry-based learning, there's no right or wrong answer with this. Nobody knows what's going to happen, but those children are empowered to be able to make some decisions. Yes, they won't have it right or wrong, but they're confident enough to present some reasoning of their own. And the other thing about inquiry-based learning, I've mentioned this already, but knowledge is learned, it's not taught. That's a big move away. We had the Apple iPad conference hosted at Jess back in June, and one of the things that it really focused on was the fact that knowledge is no longer a currency in education. You know, the people who have the knowledge don't necessarily have the power because of the era that we live in. Technology, knowledge is at our fingertips. So the currency are those learning skills, how children find the knowledge, how they use it, what they do with it. So your research, your independence, your decision making, your collaborating. So personal and learning skills is a big element of our real life learning at Jess, and developing the children's collaboration, their risk taking, their decision making, and enterprise skills as well. Those skills that business leaders, entrepreneurs are successful at in later life, instilling those from an early age in our children. So in terms of managing change, using their initiative. Why are we implementing a real life learning curriculum? Well, my question now is why not? When you look at real life learning at its best with those engagement levels, why not? We do have an outstanding curriculum at Jess. We did have a creative curriculum. We've moved that forward now with a real life learning approach. And we hope that we will deepen our children's understanding and provide deeper learning for them and prepare them for life beyond the classroom. One of our big targets in our self-evaluation form and in our school development plan this last year has been for a wider application of English and maths skills across the curriculum. And one of the ways that we have facilitated this is through real life learning projects where the children aren't in a subject specific lesson, but they're in a project where they're using and applying those skills. Pupil engagement and enjoyment levels I've already touched on, and the impact on learning. We feel that it has really moved our learning on, especially in terms of the learning skills. And another quote here that really moves away from memorisation of knowledge and how important it is to be able to reflect, to be able to gain their own knowledge. We're not going to go into massive detail today in terms of how we plan our real life projects. We do have the presentation with more project planner examples on the website, and we're around for a little while later if you want some more ideas aside from the projects we're going to talk about today. But the very first thing we did, as I say, we had a few insets and we had a common understanding. We agreed a common understanding of what real life learning looked like at Jess, why we were doing it. We had insets on inquiry-based learning by one of our current staff who's very passionate about inquiry-based learning and has done some work on his master's towards it. We had an enterprise inset. Flexible timetabling is something we have really moved on. We did teach maths and English every day, discreetly, some cross-curricular links, but we've broken those barriers of the timetable down. We're very restricted here. I know at Jess we're quite restricted in terms of how much Arabic the children need to have, how much they're outside of the classroom at specialist lessons, PE, French, music. So we needed to make sure that we were maximising the time we had with them as class teachers in our classroom to facilitate these projects. So a more flexible approach to timetable where alternate days we have double maths and double English in some year groups, and we can see through a project morning or project afternoon. Risk taker, the project-based approach, as I said, we had a minimum expectation of one project per term. But when we first started this out, year groups tended to plan a real life project on top of the topic they were already covering that term. So it was almost extra work. So what we've done this year is we've blended our topic and we've pulled the projects from the topic, from the knowledge, the understanding, the skills that we are accountable to in the national curriculum, and we've built our project to facilitate that. So in some year groups in a term they might have 4 mini projects rather than a topic exhausting itself over 14 weeks, which we felt was happening with our current curriculum. Risk takers at all levels. This has been a massive learning curve for all staff in terms of just letting go, letting the children lead their own learning, taking a step back, becoming a facilitator and giving the children the power and the empowerment. We've appointed newly a curriculum innovation leader. He's currently working in year 6. This is someone who is passionate about inquiry-based learning, active learning, has changed up the curriculum across the school through disseminating his ideas, meeting with teams. He also ensures that the subject leaders are out and about. We've changed lots of topics and they're ensuring accountability across the school to ensure there's progression in the science, progression in the DT, progression in the art, albeit within these real life learning projects. And again, consistent approach to planning in terms of projects. Pupil leadership is another element. We've got children, as I said, with a more able group outside of the classroom doing real life learning. Our charity committee, one of their big projects last year was developing a new, we asked them the question, does Jess need a new school uniform? They spent almost 2 terms on it, and this year that project has come to fruition and we now have a school uniform that was designed, the research was done all behind the scenes by our school council. They were out talking to parent voice, getting parents involved, student voice in the playground, designing the uniform and also investigating what types of material in the current climate that we have. And we've had a very positive response to that. We've rolled the uniform out this year and 80% of the parents have got on board with that. ICT is a learning tool. Again, we've talked about mobile technology. We're very fortunate at Jess. We have lots of ICT resources. We've had funding from our JPG, which is our parent group. We see ICT now in our curriculum as a learning tool. It's no more, no less than a pair of scissors, as Roy Blatchford says. So it's at the children's fingertips and they use it to enhance their learning. And when it comes to inquiry-based learning, real-life learning, that research tool is excellent, but also the presentation tool in terms of children presenting their findings, presenting their solutions through, may it be a video, a prezi, an e-book. And building in reflection time, although it comes at the end of the list, it's so important when you trial something new in school in terms of curriculum to talk about it, to take time to talk teaching, allow the teachers to share best practice. One of the recent teach meets that we did was across the 2 JES schools, Ranches and ourselves, and a common thread in the successes that we shared was the real life learning, the inquiry-based learning. Lots of people brought that forward as a success they had this year. So again, consolidating the view that it is moving our learning forward and our children's learning skills. I'm now going to pass you over to Carol. There's been a lot of theory behind it and how we reached our real life learning journey, and she's going to talk about a successful project in year 1 that she led on.
Yeah, basically in year 1 we carried out a real life learning project in term 2. The topic we were covering was fairy tales, and we had a huge amount to do with the children anyway, and we still had to try and shoehorn in enterprise, real life learning, etc. So one of the ways we decided to do it was to link our end of term party with World Book Day and our topic, which was fairy tales. The children fully organised the ball, and we used our parents as partners because they were really the facilitators with the children, and we as teachers overseed exactly what they were doing. So how did we go about it? Basically, we set the scenario to the children that we were very, very busy and we couldn't organise their fairy tale ball for them because we had so much to do that we really didn't have the time to think about the games and the decorations and everything that was needed for them to have a party. And of course we had the really disappointed faces, and the children were so, you know, not happy that they weren't getting their party. So we role played it into, well, why don't you organise it yourself? You know, it's a good idea. You organise it. What kind of things would you need to have, or what kind of things do you think we need to think about when we're organising your party? So the children were brainstorming ideas and coming up with, you know, oh, we would have lots of games. We'd need to have some food. We might have some posters up, some decorations. And we had all these ideas on the board, and then together we categorised them into different committees. And that's when the committees were decided. We came up with 5 different committees. We had a decorating committee, an advertising, organisation, food and games committee. And the children then went away that day excited about which committee they wanted to take part in, and they came back the following day and they actually had to write an application form. Bear in mind our children are year 1, so we obviously, you know, differentiated it. Some of them had some pro formas to work with, some of them had some guidance, and obviously our more able children, were able to just go ahead and actually start, you know, applying for the job and seeing what learning skills they had that could help with those committees. From there, some of them got through to the next stage where they could, you know, talk to us and give us a presentation on how well they were going to do in that particular job, and then the committees were formed. After the committees were formed, the children again were so enthusiastic to take part in it. We invited our parents in. We had 5 parents per class. There are 4 classes, so we had 5 parents. We invited them all in and gave them a pack on basically what it was that they were going to have to do. So each committee was given an overview, which is exactly what the parents were given, and you'll see that on the next slide in a second. And it's basically a thank you letter from, you know, our head teacher to say, you know, thank you for applying for the job. I'm sure you've got the right skills to be able to carry this forward, etc., etc. And then each committee gave them a list of things to think about. For example, if they were on the food committee, they had to think about if they have children who had food allergies. If they were on the games committee, it had to be, you know, games that could be played within the classroom, etc. So we're given a list of things to think about, and they were told that they were only being given 20 golden coins to perform their role in their committee. So for each committee, they were given 20 coins and a price list as well. And again, they were given 20 minutes at the end of each day for 5 days. So they had to learn to manage their time and to set themselves goals for each day to try and cover it as well. So if you go on to, this is basically an example of the letter that was sent to each committee. This is the example of the food committee, and also the children went on with their parent as a facilitator to make up a job spec. So they basically had to decide on some roles. You know, there was going to be someone who was a treasurer, someone who was a chairperson to make the final decision, someone to work with the money. They had to come up with a to-do list for the 5 days so that on each day when they came in and the parent was there, they were ready to get started because they didn't have an awful lot of time to do it. They had to choose the food appropriately and send that to, well, Mrs. Parr or Mrs. Barker, head teachers, to make sure that the food was appropriate for the party or the decorations were appropriate, etc. And they had to work out the costs of whether it was food or games, the resources that were needed, and then they had to go on and decide what kind of things they would need to do for their committee. This was an example of a food list. The prices. Obviously it came up with huge discussion, because if the children wanted Coca-Cola, it was 19 coins, but they only had 20 coins. You know, if they wanted to have strawberries, it was only 1 coin. So there was a huge amount of discussion about, you know, why do you think the Coca-Cola is 20 coins and something's only, you know, 1 coin? So they had a huge amount of learning in that side of it as well. And this was just an example of the coins that they were given, and they took great pride over them. Basically, learning across the curriculum, it actually ended up a lot wider than we had first anticipated. We started the Real Life Learning Project as an enterprise and as an end-of-term party, and the amount of other things that came from it were huge. Obviously, writing for a purpose, you know, they wrote a letter to Mrs. Burke and asked if they could have the party in the first place, and they actually got a reply from her as well, which the enthusiasm of that was great. The food committee had to make menus. The advertising committee had to make posters. They had application forms, reflections, evaluations, and in the end they all wrote thank you notes and letters to the parents. In terms of maths, well, money was a huge thing, because the children were given 20 coins. They had to add, they had to take away, they had to see how they were going to work it as best as they could. They had to manage their time on a daily basis. They had 20 minutes to work with. How were they going to work their time when they were working as a committee? And also on the day of the party, you know, they only had a set slot in the day. They had to prepare how long it would take to organise, to have the party, to play the games, to clean it up at the end of the day. So all of that was taken into account. Measuring, again, when they were doing their posters, you know, they were measuring the lengths of the doors, etc., because they had huge banners, which you'll see in a second as well. And they had to deal with that in terms of maths as well. Across the curriculum, art and DT were obvious with the decorations, etc., that were made. Enterprise, as I say, that was huge, because they really got to learn about the roles that they might, you know, use in the future. And inquiry-based learning, they asked huge amounts of questions. They inquired about it themselves, and they really learned lots from it. The next pictures is the ball itself. The children obviously all came in dressed up in their fairy tale costumes. Each classroom, as I say, there were 4 classrooms, and each of them were decorated completely differently. Our parents went over and above the expectations to make sure that the children got exactly what they wanted. You know, one of the classrooms had the carriage, which was actually an old bed that they're meant to bring them in to be there for the children to see. This one here, it's not exactly the clearest, but they had full table decorations. The children decided on what was going to be the centerpieces. The parents, you know, gave us and helped us to bring in the table sets. There was actually a tree hung from the centre of the classroom with, you know, carrots on the bottom of it. It was really magical for them. And the picture at the end is them enjoying their fairy tale ball that they planned and prepared. Overall, I would say that the children had no idea that they were learning, had no idea that they were, you know, writing for a purpose. And really, the looks on their faces tells you it all. So, yeah. And I would say that one of the parents also said to me was that, you know, they were given 20 golden coins, and they all managed to do it within those 20 golden coins. And very often children think that money grows in trees and they don't realise the real value of it. And that, she said, was a perfect opportunity for them to work to the amount of money they were given. And she said that that's one of the key things that she took away from it, was that when she now gives her daughter 20 dirhams or however much, that she actually thinks about how she's going to use it and use it wisely. And that, yeah, was the Year 1 fairy tale ball.
I'm just going to run you through another example of a real life project. This time in Year 2 we had a Posh Paws project, and it took place in term 2 last year, when the minimum expectation was still 1 project per term. This project came about because the year group looked at their topic Fun in the Sun. They had a tenuous link to science to their animals unit, and they thought, how could we make our science a real project and bring it to life? And their science was animals. They had information text in English, and they also needed a trip for the term or a theme day. And Posh Paws have been coming into Jess for years now into the F2 department as part of their knowledge and understanding of the world. So the opening, the entry point for this particular real life learning project was Posh Paws wrote the Year 2 children a letter asking for their help twofold. So in the first instance, they asked for help fundraising to look after their animals. For those that don't know about Posh Paws is an animal sanctuary and a petting farm, and they've got units in a few areas in Dubai and Sharjah. So they wrote the Year 2 children a letter, and automatically, straight away, the children had a purpose for learning. We need to fundraise, we need to help Posh Paws, how can we do it? On the second hand, Posh Paws also said that they were coming in to visit Foundation 2, they were short on staff, and could the Year 2 work for them for the day and become experts on the animals and present the animals to Foundation 2 and teach them all about the animals. So peer-led learning at its best. So the children, needless to say, were really excited about this project. And the first part was the raising the money. So they all got into teams first of all, and they came up with ideas, enterprise skills, leadership skills, and they pitched some ideas of how they could raise money. And there were numerous ideas, from washing cars in the school car park. Bake sale was the best pitch in terms of the group that pitched that. And so it came to fruition. And again, the children had to work out who would they invite to the bake sale. They had to write posters advertising the bake sale. What year groups would they invite? How many children? How many cakes would they need? How would they sell the cakes? How would they package the cakes? How much would they charge for the cakes? What would the profit be? And in a minute I'll show you some more photos of them actually counting the money and working out the profits themselves. So lots of maths and English across curriculum, enterprise skills. The second half of the project was the inquiry-based learning element, where the children actually had to go away and become experts. So they found out, first of all, what animals they wrote a letter back to Posh Paws, lots of questions for Posh Paws, lots of exploring of what animals Posh Paws would bring to school, which animals in their teams of 3 they were going to become experts on, what questions would the Foundation 2 children ask about those children, about those animals, and where were they going to find the answers, from researching on the internet to books. And the teachers also set up a bit of a carousel day where they were experts, and the children had to go take notes and do research that way as well. So it wasn't just research through the internet. Then they became experts. Then they had to put all that information, present it into an information text. Some did it in an information text, some did it as an ebook, so that when the animals came into school for the day, they had a real audience, they had real animals, and it was a real experience. And they were teaching the Foundation 2 children all about their animals. I'm going to show you a little, there's some photos there just of the research and the high levels of engagement, the collaboration, the inquiry-based learning, the independence. And I'm just going to show you a little video, a little animoto that the children, one of the groups made at the end of the project, just to showcase in assembly what their project entailed. And you can just see, hopefully, from the video how much enjoyment they got out of it and how much independence. Hopefully this works.
Linking into our D&T topic of biscuits, this project was run over 2 weeks, where the children focused on this entirely for 2 weeks. The idea was that they built, they created, designed, produced, marketed their own biscuit to sell. The task was organised and run by these cards. So the children had 10 of these. They had to work through each card in order to get to the next level of design. Here's an example where it talks about the brand name and the product profile. On each card was the success criteria or points to note. So the children then worked within their teams to follow these. It meant that the teacher then could step away from the learning, the children could lead, and we could be the facilitator. In this role, because of the link to the apprentice, we took on as teachers the role of Alan Sugar. Here we've got some of the pictures to show the learning journey that happened to bring this project, this D&D project, to make it into a real life learning project. It began at the very beginning with taste testing. In order for the children to understand the biscuits, they needed to look at the current market. So we went and purchased just a range of biscuits, and they had a simple grid to evaluate. However, that simple grid soon became quite difficult, because for them to evaluate them fully, we asked them to find the cost of each biscuit. So they had to take the packets, count how many they were, break it down and work out how many fills or dirhams it was, which became a maths exercise in itself for some of our children. This then went on to the distributed leadership. The children formed their own groups. They had that choice. And within that, they had to use those key learning skills, collaboration, decision making, and take risks because they were working with out of their comfort zone. A lot of them choose to move away from their friends, which was great for their learning and their challenge. It then became a very big project on teamwork because on one of the days they had to make the biscuits. As teachers, we modelled this at first, but then they had to go into their teams and bring in everything they needed. We as teachers, as Jess, we supplied the ingredients only. As a team, they had to make the list of all the resources they need, every spoon, pot, pan, and in terms of itself, they became such independent learners. This was crucial for time management, organisation, and those communication collaboration skills. Once they'd made their initial biscuits, they then decorated them. This became a big project for their reflection, their evaluation, and calculating the budget and the profit was crucial. As you can see from these beautiful biscuits, these were their first ones when they made one batch with all the Smarties and the icing. When they worked out the cost of these became quite expensive, a lot more than a Twix or a Mars bar, which came as quite a shock to Year 5. Okay. By the end of the project, by the 2 weeks, the final outcome was the bake sale. So they had to produce their stand. As a team, they came up with a theme which linked to their biscuit. They had to decorate and market that product as well as themselves, and some of them took it quite on board and got really into depth with it. This is where we have to mention the parents, because although they made their initial sample in school, they made their biscuits at home. So the parents became heavily involved in this. It also meant that as a team, they were arranging, either they made them separately or together. And again, that collaboration, communication went from inside Jess to outside Jess for those real life learning skills. All marketing decisions, resources were created by their team, and that was crucial for them. When it came to real life learning and the writing is where this project really came to life. One of the tasks was their product profile. It started off simple, but by the end of it, the children had really built it up into such a detailed example. As you can see, we have shorties here. They went through and they researched other projects to bring all this to life. We had instructional writing, which we'd covered earlier on in the year, where they actually had to write the recipe for their biscuits, how they made it, and also display that on their stand. Things like allergies had to be considered. At the end of their project, we had quite a detailed evaluation recount that they had to think about their product, themselves, and their group. So they were thinking how they were reflecting on that, and it became quite a detailed recount for them. Ongoing alongside the whole project was the marketing, the slogans, the jingles, the adverts. We had a lot of children using their iPads to make their own television commercials, which then went onto their stand, and they just loved the whole process. Then we had real life opportunities for maths. So as I mentioned earlier, you can see an example of the template here. This was their budgeting. They had to work out not only the ingredients, how much they needed, bags of flowers, they had to go and research. If they wanted sprinkles on there, they had to find the cost for it and break that down. They had to then take it out and find out how much the cost of each biscuit, and then how they would add the decorations, budget for that, so that they could then make the final price and sell it for profit. It became quite a detailed project, but the children really got to grips with it. Soon the modifications were made to make them more cost effective. We also had the designing of the nets, where they had to put them in their own biscuit brand, something that we hadn't thought about, but the children became quite detailed on that, and the labelling and the shapes that they needed. And then when it came to the actual the bake sale, we told them they had to organise their own float. So they had to think about their cost, the change, if people bought it, how much change would they need within that float. There was the obvious paying the bills, working with our audience of, not paying the bills, sorry, people paying for the biscuits. And then, at the end of it, they had to sit as a group and work out their final costings and work out how much profit they made. and whether they were right in their calculations. This was a huge project, which I can only say that the children thoroughly enjoyed. And this 2-week project, they wanted just to carry it on, and we had children going home so excited, so enthused, and the work that they did without them realising was crucial to their learning.
Just to summarise again, what is real life learning? Well, it is authentic learning. It's giving children experiences of real life, and it's preparing them for life beyond school, outside the classroom. How do we do it at Jess? I'm sure you do it in different ways at your school, but what we've really done is raise the profile of it in terms of timetabling, stepping back from being dictators to being facilitators for the children, through the real life learning projects across 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 or 5 weeks. And why do we do it? Why do we do anything in teaching to impact pupil outcomes? And the impact on learning at our school, as we've said again and again, that's what real life learning is all about. It's repetitive, it's using and applying those skills over and over again. Again and again, we've said about the engagement and the enjoyment levels of our children. Challenge and extension through the using and applying of skills across subjects, across contexts. The links that the children make between learning, ongoing, they are refining their own knowledge, they're challenging their own knowledge, and they're deepening their learning. And through the learning skills, and we've said before, knowledge is no longer the currency, the learning skills are, and we've really raised the profile of facilitating the development of those learning skills at Jess. And there's another quote there, the meaning of knowing is shifted from being able to remember and repeat information to being able to find and use it. So we like to think at Jess that our real life learning empowers the children to go off, find out their own information and deliver that to others, and peer-led learning plays a big part there as well.